This is Chapter 14, discussion number 2, Types of Money. There are 3 different types of money in any type of economy. The first type is what is referred to as commodity money, the actual items of value, gold, gems, cattle. If you remember reading in the Old Testament, a lot of times the transactions were completed by the exchanging of parts of the flock, sheep and cattle and that type of thing. That's commodity money, where the actual items of value are the items that are actually being exchanged. As we start getting into the Middle Ages, we start running into representative money, paper money that is essentially coupon money. The actual items of value, whether it be gold, gems, or some other idea of value, silver, would be stored somewhere, and the receipt saying that you have these things stored here would then be used to be exchanged out in the open economy. So you could give your money to a bank or a goldsmith, and then they would give you a receipt, and maybe they give you in increments of £5 sterling, for example, if you were in England, or lira, or French franc, or something like that. And then you would actually use that paper money, saying, here, I've got $5 worth of gold at this goldsmith or at this bank. Will you take my receipt? And then if you want the gold, you can go get it. That's the idea of representative money, that it's essentially a receipt of what you actually have. And for a long period of time, as we entered into the modern era and through the United States history, we had essentially what was considered representative money. Gold stored somewhere in a bank or something like that, and then the bank would issue a receipt, and then that receipt would be used by others and circulate through the economy. And then maybe at some point someone would show up and actually say, hey, I want the gold. Sometimes banks would cheat a little bit, and they would issue out more receipts than they had actual gold, but again, that's based on the fractional reserve system of how banks work in the first place. The third type of money is called fiat money, and it's called fiat money simply because the word fiat means because I said so. The United States government since the 1920s has been entirely on the idea of fiat money. It has value because the government says so. And they say so by the concept of legal tender, where the government has actually on the money, if you pull out your wallet and pull out some American money, you will see on there that the money is for all debts, public and private. It is legal tender, which means the government requires people to take it as payment. There is no gold anywhere sitting somewhere waiting for that money to show up and claim it. That went out in the 1940s. Now, early American history, the United States government was not the only issuer of money. As you heard me mention before, banks would issue their own money for precious metals. Now, the problem with banks issuing money is that they weren't legal tender, because only the government can determine legal tender, because it's with the penalty of government enforcement. So if someone wanted to pay you money, say from the M&T Bank, and you weren't very sure that M&T did good books and that maybe they didn't have that money there in case you wanted to get it, you would have every right to say, no thank you, I'm not taking your money. Another example of money not working was during the Revolutionary War. The Continental Congress printed money, and pretty much the only thing that got people to take the money was patriotism, because no one was taking the Continental Congress seriously. For one thing, they were taking on the world's largest power in a war, and no one was really sure they were going to win. But on top of that, the Continental Congress was printing money with no gold, and so no one wanted to take their money. In fact, if you really wanted to insult someone or something, say it wasn't even worth a Continental, because a Continental had no value because no one really wanted it. Again, going back to a characteristic of money is an accepted value. So the idea of the dollar that Congress started in 1792 after we had the Constitutional Convention pretty much establishes what a dollar was, and then that the United States good faith and its tax base as established by Alexander Hamilton, started to give the United States dollar its value. And so that's the type of money we have here in the United States, fiat money. So essentially, we have to have good government policy in order to maintain a value of our dollar. And that's where the Federal Reserve comes in. In the early 1900s, several bank failures and people hoping that nice, magnanimous rich guys such as John D. Rockefeller, J.P. Morgan, would come and rescue banks. It was realized that we really ought not to hope and allow this to be held by individuals, this power over banks. And so the United States established the Federal Reserve to support fiat money and to support its value by expanding how much money is available or contracting how much money is available, and also to help banks out in time of crisis. However, the Federal Reserve was shown not to be up to the task as we ran into the Great Depression in the 1930s. So the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, the FDIC, was created to insure savings deposits for everyday Americans as they had their money in the banks, because thousands of banks had failed going into the Great Depression and people had lost all of their savings. So the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation was created to give value to those savings deposits by insuring them, saying that all the money would be replaced if the bank went bankrupt. And so that was a very highly important thing. Now, up until about the mid-2000s, the amount insured was $100,000. However, as we started going into the bank closures and other economic difficulties in 2008, 2009, the FDIC has bumped up the insured amount. Any savings account will be insured up to $250,000 should the bank go bankrupt. And so that is the current value that it is saved to. This concludes discussion number 2, the types of money.